The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured gardens of Clarence's house as Camilla stood by the tall windows of her private study. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass, showing a woman who had traveled an extraordinary journey from being one of Britain's most controversial figures to wearing the crown that once seemed impossible to reach. The weight of recent events pressed heavily on her shoulders as she clutched a delicate china teacup, her hands trembling slightly despite her efforts to maintain composure. Behind her, the room buzzed with quiet activity. Private secretaries moved with practiced efficiency, their voices hushed as they coordinated what would become one of the most significant announcements in recent royal history. The decision had been months in the making, discussed behind closed doors in meetings that stretched late into the evening, but now the moment of truth had arrived. Camilla's mind drifted back to the conversation she had with King Charles just 3 days earlier. They had been walking through the gardens at Highgrove, their favorite retreat where some of their most honest discussions took place away from the formality of official residences. The autumn air had been crisp, leaves crunching beneath their feet as they navigated paths they had walked countless times before, but this walk felt different. Charles had been unusually quiet, his brow furrowed with the weight of considerations that went far beyond personal preference. "My darling," he had said, stopping beside the ancient oak tree they had planted together years ago, "we need to discuss what comes next." His voice carried the gravity of a king speaking to his queen, but underneath lay the concern of a husband who understood the enormous burden he was about to place on the woman he loved. The conversation that followed would change everything. Charles spoke of his vision for the monarchy's future, of streamlining royal duties and creating a more efficient system that could better serve the British people in an era of unprecedented challenges. The economic pressures facing the nation, the changing social landscape, and the need for the royal family to demonstrate both relevance and responsibility had all contributed to a decision that would reshape Camilla's role entirely. What troubled Camilla most wasn't the additional responsibilities themselves, but the timing. Just as she had begun to find her footing as queen consort, just as public opinion had started to shift in her favor after decades of scrutiny and criticism, she was being asked to take on duties that would thrust her even further into the spotlight. The irony wasn't lost on her that success in her current role had led to this expansion of expectations. As she turned away from the window, Camilla's eyes fell on a framed photograph sitting on her desk. It showed her with her children, Tom and Laura, taken during a rare private moment at a family gathering. The image reminded her of the personal cost of her public life, of missed birthdays and abbreviated holidays, of conversations cut short by the demands of duty. Now, with these new responsibilities looming, she wondered how much more of herself she would have to sacrifice on the altar of royal service. The sound of approaching footsteps drew her attention to the doorway, where Sir Clive Alderton, the king's principal private secretary, appeared with a respectful nod. His expression was serious, reflecting the gravity of the morning's agenda. "Your Majesty, we're ready for the briefing," he announced, his voice carrying the professional courtesy that masked years of experience navigating royal crises and celebrations alike. Camilla set down her teacup with deliberate care, straightening her shoulders in a gesture that had become second nature over the years. The transformation from the hesitant woman who had once hidden from photographers to the confident queen who now faced them directly was remarkable, yet she still felt the flutter of anxiety that preceded major announcements. Today's revelation would not only affect her own future but would signal a fundamental shift in how the British monarchy operated. The briefing room had been arranged with military precision. Senior advisors, communications specialists, and constitutional experts filled the chairs around a polished mahogany table, their faces reflecting the seriousness of the occasion. Charts and documents lay spread across the surface, evidence of the extensive planning that had gone into this moment. Each person present understood that they were participating in a historic reconfiguration of royal responsibilities. "Ladies and gentlemen," Camilla began, her voice steady despite the emotions churning beneath the surface, "today we embark on a new chapter for the monarchy, one that will require courage, adaptation, and an unwavering commitment to serving the British people." The words felt surreal as she spoke them, knowing that in a few hours, they would be broadcast across the globe, scrutinized and analyzed by constitutional scholars, political commentators, and ordinary citizens alike. The announcement would reveal that Queen Camilla was to assume unprecedented responsibilities within the royal structure, taking on roles traditionally held by other senior royals who had either stepped back from public life or whose advancing age required a redistribution of duties.
The changes represented the most significant reorganization of royal responsibilities since the abdication crisis of 1936, though the circumstances couldn't have been more different. One of the most significant aspects of her expanded role would involve international diplomacy.
Camilla would begin representing the monarchy at major state functions previously handled by other family members, conducting solo overseas visits, and serving as the primary royal liaison with Commonwealth nations during a particularly delicate period in their relationship with Britain. The weight of this responsibility was enormous, requiring her to master intricate diplomatic protocols while representing not just the crown but the entire nation on the world stage.
The domestic implications were equally profound.
Camilla would take on increased involvement in parliamentary functions, including a more active role in the state opening of Parliament and other constitutional ceremonies. This expansion would require her to develop expertise in areas of governance that had previously been outside her purview, necessitating extensive briefings with constitutional experts and government officials. Perhaps most personally challenging would be her new role in managing the royal family's public image and internal dynamics. With several senior royals having stepped back from public duties under various circumstances, Camilla found herself in the position of being both a unifying figure and a decision-maker in family matters that inevitably became public issues. The pressure to maintain family harmony while serving the public interest created a delicate balance that would test all her skills in diplomacy and emotional intelligence. As the briefing continued, Camilla listened to detailed explanations of security requirements, scheduling implications, and the massive logistical undertaking that would be required to implement these changes. The royal protection officers would need to expand their operations significantly, while the communications team would have to develop new strategies for managing increased media attention. Every aspect of her life would need to be restructured to accommodate these expanded responsibilities. The personal toll was something that concerned her deeply, though she knew it wouldn't be appropriate to voice these worries in this forum. The increased travel would mean more time away from the private life she cherished, fewer quiet moments with Charles, and limited opportunities for the spontaneous activities that helped her maintain her sense of self outside the royal role. The grandmother who enjoyed reading stories to her grandchildren would have to compete with the queen who needed to attend state dinners and review diplomatic briefings. Yet despite these concerns, Camilla felt a growing sense of determination as the briefing progressed. The challenges were real, but so was the opportunity to make a meaningful difference in how the monarchy served the nation. She had already proven herself capable of growth and adaptation, transforming from a private citizen thrust unwillingly into public life to a respected member of the royal family. This next phase would require another transformation, but she had learned to trust in her ability to rise to meet new expectations. The discussion turned to public reaction and media management, areas where Camilla's experience had been particularly hard-won. The communications team presented polling data and focus group results that painted a complex picture of public sentiment. While her approval ratings had improved significantly over recent years, taking on such expanded responsibilities would inevitably invite renewed scrutiny and criticism from those who still questioned her place in the royal hierarchy. "We must be prepared for every possible reaction," advised the communications director, her tone reflecting years of experience managing royal controversies. "There will be those who applaud this modernization of the monarchy, viewing it as evidence of efficient adaptation to changing circumstances. Others may see it as inappropriate expansion of influence, particularly given the historical sensitivity around the queen consort's role." Camilla nodded thoughtfully, understanding that public perception would be crucial to the success of this initiative. The royal family's relationship with the British people had always been complex, built on tradition but requiring constant renewal and relevance. Her own journey from public pariah to accepted royal had taught her that persistence, authenticity, and demonstrated commitment to service could gradually shift even the most entrenched opinions. The meeting concluded with a detailed timeline for the announcement and implementation of these changes. The statement would be released simultaneously across all royal communication channels, followed by a carefully orchestrated series of interviews and public appearances designed to explain the reasoning and reassure the public about continuity of service. Camilla would need to be prepared for intense media scrutiny in the days and weeks that followed. As the advisors filed out of the room, Camilla remained seated for a few moments, absorbing the magnitude of what had just been decided. In a matter of hours, her life would change dramatically once again, just as it had when she married Charles, and again when he became king. Each transition had required her to discover new aspects of herself, to develop capabilities she hadn't known she possessed. The afternoon was spent in final preparations, reviewing talking points, and coordinating with Buckingham Palace to ensure all aspects of the announcement were perfectly synchronized. The palace press office worked with unprecedented efficiency, knowing that any miscommunication could lead to confusion or misinterpretation of such a significant change in royal structure. Charles arrived at Clarence House in the early evening, his presence immediately providing the emotional support Camilla needed as the final hours approached. They had weathered many storms together, from the early days of their relationship when public disapproval seemed overwhelming, through the challenges of their marriage and his accession to the throne. This felt like another test of their partnership, requiring them to balance personal concerns with public duty. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, taking her hand in his as they stood together in the same study where the morning had begun. The question carried layers of meaning. Was she ready for the increased workload, the additional scrutiny, the pressure of representing the monarchy in ways no queen consort had been asked to do in living memory? "I have to be," she replied, squeezing his hand. "We've come too far to retreat now." Her words reflected not just acceptance of her new role, but a recognition that their journey together had been leading to this moment of expanded responsibility and service. The sun was setting over London as final preparations were completed. Tomorrow would bring the announcement that would reshape not only Camilla's role but the entire structure of the modern monarchy. The woman who had once been Britain's most reluctant royal was about to become one of its most essential figures, carrying responsibilities that would define the crown's relationship with the nation for years to come. As night fell over Clarence House, Camilla stood once again by the window of her study, but this time she wasn't looking back at the past or worrying about the future. She was present in the moment, steeling herself for the challenges ahead while drawing strength from the knowledge that she had already overcome obstacles that once seemed insurmountable. Tomorrow would begin a new chapter in her extraordinary story, one that would test everything she had learned about duty, service, and the complex art of being royal in the modern world. The morning of the announcement dawned grey and drizzly, typical London weather that seemed to mirror the somber mood within Buckingham Palace. By 6 o'clock, the royal communications team had assembled in the palace press office, their faces reflecting the gravity of what lay ahead. Coffee cups and revised press statements littered the conference table as they made final adjustments to wording that had been scrutinized and refined countless times over the past weeks. Meanwhile, at Clarence House, Camilla was completing her morning routine with unusual deliberation. Every action felt weighted with significance, from choosing her outfit to reviewing her notes one final time. She had selected a navy blue dress with modest pearl accessories, projecting an image of competence and dignity that would be essential for the day's events. Her lady-in-waiting, Dame Sarah Keswick, moved quietly around the room, ensuring every detail was perfect while respecting the Queen's need for contemplative silence. The decision to break the news through a combination of official statement and personal interview had been carefully calculated. The royal family had learned from past communication missteps that major announcements required multiple channels and clear explanation to prevent misunderstanding or misinterpretation. Today's strategy involved releasing the formal statement at precisely 9 a.m., followed by an exclusive interview with a respected broadcast journalist at 11 a.m., and concluding with a series of briefings for Commonwealth representatives throughout the afternoon. In the palace library, King Charles met with the Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Justin Welby, to discuss the constitutional implications of the announcement. The Church's perspective on the expanded royal role was crucial, given the monarchy's deep ties to the established Church and the Queen Consort's position within that relationship. The Archbishop, who had developed a strong working relationship with both Charles and Camilla over the years, expressed his support while acknowledging the precedent-setting nature of the changes. "Your Majesty," the Archbishop said, his voice carrying the weight of institutional authority, "what we announce today represents not just a redistribution of responsibilities, but an evolution in how the Crown serves both God and country. Queen Camilla's expanded role must be seen as a natural response to contemporary needs rather than a departure from tradition." The constitutional lawyers had been equally thorough in their preparations. Led by Sir Geoffrey Cox, the team had spent months reviewing precedents, examining the legal framework surrounding royal duties, and consulting with parliamentary authorities to ensure the changes fell within established constitutional boundaries. Their conclusion was unequivocal. While unprecedented in scope, the expanded role was entirely within the monarch's prerogative to assign. At 8:30 a.m., the final coordination call took place between Clarence House, Buckingham Palace, and 10 Downing Street. Prime Minister's office had been briefed on the announcement and had prepared a statement of support that would be released shortly after the royal announcement. The government's backing was essential, as it demonstrated that the changes had official approval and wouldn't create constitutional tension between the Crown and elected officials. The moment arrived with startling suddenness. At exactly 9 a.m., the royal website published the official statement, while simultaneously, copies were distributed to media outlets worldwide. The carefully crafted words announced that Her Majesty Queen Camilla will assume additional responsibilities within the royal household, including expanded roles in international diplomacy, constitutional ceremonies, and Commonwealth relations, effective immediately. Within minutes, the palace switchboard was flooded with calls from journalists, constitutional experts, and foreign diplomatic missions seeking clarification and comment. The planned response system activated smoothly, with designated spokespersons providing consistent information while referring detailed questions to the upcoming interview session. Social media erupted with immediate reactions that ranged from supportive to skeptical to openly hostile. The royal family's social media team, prepared for this response, began implementing their crisis communication strategy, amplifying positive coverage while monitoring for coordinated disinformation campaigns that often accompanied major royal announcements. Camilla, watching the initial media response from her private sitting room, felt a familiar mix of anxiety and resolve. The comments scrolling across the television screen included praise for her dedication and service alongside criticism questioning her suitability for expanded responsibilities. She had expected this range of reactions, but experiencing them in real time still felt overwhelming. The important responses will come later, Charles reminded her, joining her in front of the television. The immediate reaction is always the most extreme. What matters is how this develops over the coming weeks and months. His words provided the reassurance she needed, drawing on his decades of experience managing public reaction to royal decisions. The 11 a.m. interview took place in the morning room at Clarence House, a space that projected warmth and accessibility while maintaining royal dignity. The journalist, Emily Maitlis, had been chosen for her experience with royal interviews and her ability to ask searching questions while maintaining appropriate respect for the institution. The setting had been carefully arranged to feel conversational rather than confrontational. Your Majesty, Maitlis began, this announcement represents the most significant expansion of a queen consort's role in modern history. What prompted this decision? The question was direct but respectful, exactly what the palace communications team had hoped for as an opening inquiry. Camilla's response had been rehearsed but felt natural. The monarchy must evolve to serve the British people effectively in changing times. With several family members reducing their public duties, it became clear that remaining active royals needed to expand their contributions. I'm honored to take on additional responsibilities that will allow the Crown to maintain its commitments to the nation and Commonwealth. The interview continued for 45 minutes, covering everything from the practical implications of her expanded role to her personal feelings about the increased scrutiny she would face. Camilla's responses demonstrated the poise and thoughtfulness she had developed over years of public service, while her occasional glimpses of vulnerability made her more relatable to viewers. One particularly poignant moment came when Maitlis asked about the personal cost of her expanded duties. This will mean more time away from family, fewer private moments, increased security requirements. How do you balance personal sacrifice with public service? Camilla paused thoughtfully before answering. Every member of our family understands that service comes with sacrifice. What makes it worthwhile is knowing that our work contributes to the well-being of the British people and the stability of institutions that have served the nation for centuries. My family supports this decision because they understand its importance. The interview's impact was immediate and largely positive. Television viewers responded favorably to Camilla's candid discussion of her role, while her obvious preparation and knowledge of the issues demonstrated her readiness for expanded responsibilities. Social media sentiment began shifting more positively as clips from the interview circulated widely. Behind the scenes, the palace was coordinating an extraordinary diplomatic effort. Commonwealth High Commissioners were being briefed individually about how the changes would affect their relationships with the Crown, while European royal houses received personal calls explaining the modifications to protocol and precedents that would result from Camilla's expanded role. The afternoon brought a series of meetings with senior government officials, including the Foreign Secretary and the Secretary of State for Commonwealth Affairs. These sessions were crucial for establishing how Camilla's new diplomatic responsibilities would integrate with existing government foreign policy initiatives. The discussions revealed the complexity of coordination required between royal diplomatic activities and official government positions. "Your Majesty's expanded role will significantly enhance our soft power capabilities," the Foreign Secretary explained during their private meeting. "However, we must ensure perfect coordination between your diplomatic activities and our broader foreign policy objectives." The conversation that followed established protocols for consultation and communication that would prevent any conflict or confusion in international settings. The Commonwealth dimension was particularly complex, as several member nations had expressed concerns about changes to traditional royal relationships. Camilla would need to make personal visits to key Commonwealth capitals to reassure leaders that the monarchy's commitment to the organization remained unchanged despite the structural modifications to how that commitment was expressed. By late afternoon, initial polling data began to emerge, showing mixed but trending positive public reaction. While there remained significant skepticism among certain demographic groups, overall opinion was more favorable than the palace had dared to hope. The careful preparation, clear communication, and Camilla's own performance during the interview had helped frame the announcement as necessary modernization rather than inappropriate power expansion. The international response proved equally encouraging. Foreign governments issued supportive statements, while royal correspondents and major international media outlets provided largely positive analysis of the changes. The narrative emerging from global coverage emphasized the monarchy's adaptability and Camilla's proven dedication to service. However, not all reactions were positive. Some members of Parliament questioned whether the changes should have been subject to greater consultation, while Republican organizations seized on the announcement as evidence of the monarchy's disconnection from democratic accountability. These criticisms had been anticipated, and the palace response emphasized the constitutional appropriateness of the king's decisions regarding royal duties. The evening brought a private family dinner at Clarence House, attended by Prince William, Catherine, and other close family members. The gathering served both as a celebration of successful communication and a planning session for managing the implementation challenges that lay ahead. The younger generation of royals would need to adjust their own roles to accommodate Camilla's expanded responsibilities. William, as heir to the throne, expressed both support for his stepmother and awareness of how these changes would affect his own future responsibilities. This sets important precedents for how the monarchy can adapt to changing circumstances, he observed during their conversation. It demonstrates that we can modernize while maintaining the essential character of the institution. Catherine's perspective focused on the practical implications for royal family coordination. With Camilla taking on increased travel and ceremonial duties, other family members would need to adjust their schedules and responsibilities accordingly. The palace would need to develop new systems for ensuring comprehensive coverage of royal duties without overwhelming any individual family member. As the day concluded, media analysis began appearing that would shape public understanding of the announcement's significance. Constitutional experts weighed in on the precedent-setting aspects of the changes, while royal biographers provided historical context for understanding how queen consorts had evolved over centuries of British monarchy. The consensus emerging from expert commentary was that the changes represented a logical adaptation to contemporary circumstances rather than a radical departure from tradition. Camilla's proven track record as queen consort provided the foundation for confidence in her ability to handle expanded responsibilities effectively. Late that evening, as Camilla reviewed the day's coverage in her private study, she felt a complex mix of relief and apprehension. The announcement had been received more positively than anyone had dared hope, but the real test would come in the implementation phase. Over the coming months, she would need to demonstrate that the confidence placed in her was justified through performance rather than promises. The phone calls from family and friends continued throughout the evening, providing personal support and encouragement that balanced the public scrutiny. Her children, Tom and Laura, expressed pride in their mother's courage and commitment, while longtime friends offered reassurance about her ability to meet these new challenges. As midnight approached, Camilla found herself once again at the window of her study, but this time the view looked different. The announcement had changed not just her role but her entire perspective on the future. The woman who had once retreated from public attention was now committed to expanding her public service in ways that would test every skill she had developed over 2 decades of royal life. The first day was complete, but it marked the beginning of a transformation that would unfold over months and years. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as the implementation phase began, requiring her to translate announced responsibilities into effective action while maintaining the grace and dedication that had brought her to this moment of unprecedented opportunity and obligation. 3 weeks after the announcement, Camilla stood in the cabinet room at 10 Downing Street, participating in her first high-level government briefing as part of her expanded role. The mahogany table around which so many crucial decisions had been made throughout British history now included her voice in discussions about international relations and Commonwealth affairs. The gravity of the moment wasn't lost on her as she listened to Foreign Office officials outline complex diplomatic challenges that would soon require her personal intervention. The transition period had been more demanding than anyone had anticipated. Each day brought new protocols to master, new relationships to navigate, and new responsibilities that required her to stretch beyond her previous experience. The learning curve was steep, but Camilla approached it with the same determination that had carried her through previous transformations in her royal role. Her private secretary's office had been completely reorganized to handle the increased workload. Additional staff members were brought in from the Foreign Office and Cabinet Office, bringing expertise in international law, diplomatic protocol, and Commonwealth relations. The traditional royal household structure was being carefully modified to accommodate responsibilities that no queen consort had previously undertaken. The first major test came with a sudden diplomatic crisis involving a Commonwealth member nation. Political tensions in the Caribbean had created a delicate situation where traditional diplomatic channels were proving insufficient, and the government requested that Camilla make personal contact with the region's leaders to provide a royal perspective that could help de-escalate the situation. Standing in her private study at Clarence House, Camilla prepared for a series of sensitive phone calls that would mark her debut in crisis diplomacy. The briefing papers spread across her desk contained classified information about regional politics, economic pressures, and historical grievances that had contributed to the current tensions. The weight of representing not just the crown but British interests in such a complex situation felt overwhelming. "Your Majesty," her new diplomatic advisor explained, "these conversations will require extreme delicacy. You'll need to express solidarity while avoiding any appearance of taking sides in domestic political disputes." The guidance reflected the sophisticated balance required in royal diplomacy, where even the most carefully chosen words could have unintended consequences. The calls themselves proved to be emotionally draining. Speaking with leaders who were managing genuine crises affecting their populations, Camilla found herself drawing on personal experiences of facing criticism and controversy to express authentic empathy while maintaining the neutral stance required of her position. Her natural warmth, which had always been one of her strongest qualities, proved valuable in establishing the personal connections that could facilitate diplomatic solutions. Meanwhile, the media scrutiny continued at an unprecedented level. Royal correspondents who had covered the family for decades found themselves analyzing every aspect of Camilla's expanding activities, while international media began paying attention to British royal affairs in ways they hadn't since the early days of Charles and Diana's marriage. The comparison was uncomfortable but unavoidable, and Camilla had to constantly prove herself worthy of the attention through substance rather than spectacle. The emotional toll was becoming evident to those closest to her. Charles noticed the strain in their private moments together, while her children expressed concern about the pace she was maintaining. The woman who had once enjoyed quiet country weekends and informal family gatherings found herself constantly surrounded by briefing papers, security personnel, and the complex logistics required for her expanded schedule. One particularly difficult evening, as she reviewed preparation materials for an upcoming visit to Australia, Camilla broke down in tears from exhaustion and overwhelming pressure. The visit would be her first major solo international trip as part of her new role, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. Australian Republicans were already using her visit as an opportunity to question the monarchy's relevance, while supporters expected her to demonstrate compelling reasons for maintaining the constitutional relationship. Charles found her in this moment of vulnerability, and their conversation that evening revealed the human cost of the institutional changes they had implemented. "I sometimes wonder if we've asked too much," he admitted, holding her close as she struggled with doubts that she rarely allowed herself to express. "It's not about what's too much," Camilla replied through her tears. "It's about whether I'm strong enough to do justice to the trust that's been placed in me. These responsibilities require someone with decades of diplomatic experience, and I'm still learning as I go." The conversation led to important adjustments in how her role was being implemented. Additional support structures were put in place, including more extensive mentoring from retired diplomats and a modified schedule that allowed for better balance between new responsibilities and recovery time. The royal household learned that even the most capable individuals needed proper support systems to handle unprecedented challenges. The Australia visit, when it finally took place, proved to be a turning point in public perception of Camilla's expanded role. Her approach combined traditional royal charm with substantive engagement on issues that mattered to Australians. She visited drought-affected farming communities, met with Indigenous leaders, and addressed business groups with a knowledge of economic issues that surprised even her critics. The highlight came during a speech at the Australian Parliament House, where she spoke about the evolving relationship between Britain and Australia with a nuance that demonstrated her growing mastery of diplomatic communication. "Our relationship is not defined by the past but by our shared commitment to democratic values and mutual prosperity," she declared, words that resonated with both supporters and skeptics of the monarchical connection. The trip's success provided validation for the expanded role while also highlighting the personal growth Camilla had achieved. Television coverage showed her confidently engaging with diverse audiences, from schoolchildren in Sydney to mining executives in Perth. The transformation from the nervous woman who had once avoided public appearances to this poised diplomatic representative was remarkable to witness. However, success brought new pressures and expectations. Each positive performance raised the bar for future engagements, while critics who had initially dismissed her capabilities began taking her seriously enough to subject her to more sophisticated scrutiny. The honeymoon period of sympathetic coverage was ending, replaced by the harder task of maintaining excellence under sustained observation. The domestic implications of her expanded role were equally complex. Parliamentary functions that had once been routine now required her active participation and preparation. The state opening of Parliament, where she would play an enhanced ceremonial role, demanded extensive briefings on legislative priorities and constitutional precedents. The Queen Consort who had once observed such ceremonies was now an integral participant in their execution. These parliamentary responsibilities brought her into regular contact with political leaders across the spectrum, requiring her to master the art of appearing engaged with policy discussions while maintaining the political neutrality essential to the Crown's constitutional role. The balance was delicate and demanding, requiring constant awareness of how her reactions and responses might be interpreted. One unexpected challenge emerged from within the royal family itself. Some extended family members struggled with the precedent-setting nature of Camilla's expanded role, particularly its implications for future generations. The changes raised questions about how royal responsibilities would be distributed as the family continued to evolve, and these discussions sometimes became tense during private family gatherings. Princess Anne, known for her direct communication style, expressed reservations about whether the changes might create unrealistic expectations for future queen consorts. "Camilla is exceptionally capable," she observed during a family meeting, "but we risk creating a template that assumes every queen consort will have the same strengths and circumstances." These internal discussions led to important clarifications about the flexibility built into the new arrangements. Palace officials emphasized that the expanded role was designed around Camilla's specific capabilities and circumstances, and would be modified for future holders of the position based on their individual strengths and the needs of the time. The workload continued to intensify as international recognition of her enhanced status led to increased requests for her participation in global events. UNESCO invited her to speak at an international conference on cultural preservation, while Commonwealth education ministers requested her presence at their annual summit. Each invitation required careful consideration of scheduling, preparation requirements, and strategic value. The preparation for these international engagements revealed the depth of expertise required for effective royal diplomacy. Camilla found herself studying complex policy papers on everything from climate change initiatives to educational development programs, while working with specialists to develop substantive contributions to these discussions rather than merely ceremonial appearances. Her speeches began reflecting this deeper engagement with global issues. Rather than the general expressions of support that had characterized much royal rhetoric, she started offering specific insights and proposals that demonstrated genuine understanding of the challenges being discussed. This evolution in her public communications marked a significant development in how royal influence could be exercised in contemporary international affairs. The personal cost remained significant. Friends who had known Camilla for decades noted changes in her demeanor and priorities, as the demands of her expanded role required her to be constantly on in ways that left little room for the spontaneous interactions and relaxed conversations she had always enjoyed. The woman who had once found restoration in quiet moments with horses and books now struggled to find time for these essential personal connections. Yet there were also unexpected rewards. The depth of her engagement with global issues provided intellectual stimulation that she found genuinely energizing, while the positive feedback from successful diplomatic interventions offered satisfaction that went beyond traditional royal duties. She discovered capabilities within herself that had never been tested in her previous role. The relationship with the press evolved as well. Royal correspondents who had initially approached her expanded role with skepticism began recognizing the substance behind her activities. Coverage became more focused on policy implications and diplomatic outcomes rather than just personal interest stories, reflecting a growing respect for her professional capabilities. International media attention intensified, with foreign correspondents taking unprecedented interest in a queen consort's activities. The global coverage brought both opportunities and challenges, as her words and actions now carried implications far beyond British borders while being subject to analysis by commentators who might not fully understand the constitutional constraints under which she operated. As the third month of her expanded role concluded, Camilla reflected on the transformation in both her daily life and her understanding of royal service. The woman who had once seen herself as a supportive partner to the king had become a significant player in British diplomacy and international relations, wielding influence that required constant careful consideration and exceptional personal discipline. The journey was far from complete. Each successful engagement built foundation for greater responsibilities, while the learning curve continued to present new challenges that tested every aspect of her character and capabilities. The quiet moments of doubt persisted alongside growing confidence, creating a complex emotional landscape that reflected the unprecedented nature of what she had undertaken. Looking ahead, the fourth phase of this story would test whether the foundation laid in these crucial early months could support the even greater challenges and opportunities that awaited a queen consort operating at the highest levels of international affairs. 6 months after the historic announcement, Camilla found herself in the most challenging situation of her expanded role. The secure conference room at the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office was filled with senior diplomats, intelligence officials, and government ministers, all focused on her as she prepared to undertake her most sensitive mission yet. A constitutional crisis in a major Commonwealth nation required delicate royal intervention, and the success or failure of her involvement could have lasting implications for both the monarchy and Britain's international relationships. The briefing materials before her contained details of a political situation so complex that seasoned diplomats had struggled to find effective approaches. The elected government was in conflict with traditional authority structures, threatening to tear apart the constitutional framework that connected the nation to the Commonwealth. Local leaders had specifically requested that Queen Camilla serve as a mediator, believing her unique position could provide the neutral ground needed for dialogue. "Your Majesty," the Foreign Secretary began, his tone reflecting the gravity of the situation, "this intervention will require diplomatic skills of the highest order. You'll be walking into a situation where every word will be scrutinized and where the outcome could determine whether we maintain a crucial relationship or watch it collapse." The weight of this responsibility settled on Camilla's shoulders like a heavy cloak, but she had learned to bear such pressure without allowing it to compromise her judgment. The months of preparation since her role expansion had led to this moment. Every briefing session, every diplomatic meeting, every careful study of international relations had been building toward her ability to handle exactly this type of crisis. Yet knowing she was prepared intellectually didn't diminish the emotional impact of accepting such enormous responsibility. The flight to the Commonwealth nation took place under unprecedented security measures, with her traveling party including constitutional lawyers, diplomatic advisors, and communication specialists who would help navigate the complex political landscape awaiting her. During the long journey, Camilla reviewed centuries of precedent for royal involvement in Commonwealth constitutional matters, searching for guidance that could inform her approach to this unique situation. Her arrival in the capital was met with carefully orchestrated ceremony that balanced respect for the crown with sensitivity to local political tensions. The crowds lining the streets included both enthusiastic supporters of the monarchical connection and silent protesters questioning foreign involvement in domestic affairs. Camilla acknowledged both groups with the same dignified composure, understanding that her role was to represent stability and continuity rather than to take sides in local disputes. The first day of meetings revealed the depth of the crisis and the complexity of emotions involved. Government ministers expressed frustration with traditional leaders they viewed as obstacles to democratic progress, while traditional authorities worried about the erosion of cultural institutions that had sustained their communities for generations. Both sides looked to Camilla as someone who could understand their perspectives and help find common ground. The private meetings were emotionally intense in ways that no amount of preparation could have anticipated. Listening to leaders describe their fears for their people's future, their frustration with misunderstanding, and their hopes for resolution required Camilla to draw on every aspect of her personal experience. Her own journey from controversial figure to respected royal gave her unique insight into how perceptions could change through patience and demonstrated commitment. One particularly moving conversation took place with a group of women leaders who represented both traditional and modern perspectives within their society. They spoke of trying to preserve cultural values while ensuring their daughters had opportunities that previous generations could never have imagined. Their words reminded Camilla of her own struggles to balance tradition with necessary change, and she found herself sharing personal reflections that helped create the trust needed for meaningful dialogue. The breakthrough came during the third day, when Camilla proposed a framework that honored traditional authority while creating clear pathways for democratic participation. Her suggestion built on successful models from other Commonwealth nations while respecting the unique cultural context of this particular situation. The proposal wasn't a complete solution, but it provided the foundation for negotiations that could prevent constitutional collapse. The emotional moment when opposing leaders shook hands in her presence marked not just a diplomatic success but a personal triumph that validated everything she had worked to become. The woman who had once been criticized for her very presence in royal life had helped preserve a constitutional relationship that mattered to millions of people across the Commonwealth. The international response to her success was immediate and overwhelmingly positive. Global media coverage emphasized her substantive contribution to resolving the crisis, while diplomatic observers noted the effectiveness of her approach. For the first time since her role expansion, commentary focused entirely on her professional capabilities rather than her personal journey or historical controversies. Returning to London, Camilla was greeted by a changed political and media landscape. The success of her intervention had established her credibility as a serious diplomatic figure, leading to increased requests for her involvement in international matters. Prime ministerial advisors began including her perspective in foreign policy discussions, while Commonwealth leaders sought her counsel on sensitive issues. However, success brought new pressures that tested her emotional resilience. The precedent set by her intervention created expectations for similar involvement in future crises, potentially placing her in increasingly difficult situations where success would be less certain. The weight of knowing that her performance could affect Britain's international relationships was sometimes overwhelming. The personal cost continued to mount. Family gatherings became rare as her schedule filled with international commitments, while her relationships with longtime friends required constant effort to maintain despite her limited availability. The grandmother who had once enjoyed impromptu visits with her grandchildren now required advanced security planning for any personal activities. Charles, witnessing the toll her expanded role was taking, initiated conversations about adjusting the implementation to ensure sustainability. Their private discussions revealed the ongoing challenge of balancing institutional needs with personal well-being, a balance that required constant recalibration as circumstances evolved. "You've exceeded every expectation," he told her during one of their rare quiet evenings together, "but we need to ensure this pace is maintainable over the long term." The monarchy's strength has always come from consistency rather than intensive periods followed by burnout. These conversations led to important modifications in how her role was structured. Additional support staff were assigned, scheduling protocols were revised to ensure adequate recovery time, and certain types of engagements were redistributed to other family members. The adjustments reflected lessons learned about the human limitations that constrained even the most capable individuals. The development of her role also influenced broader discussions about the monarchy's future. Prince William and Catherine began preparing for eventual transitions that would incorporate lessons learned from Camilla's experience, while younger family members studied her approach to balancing traditional royal duties with contemporary diplomatic engagement. The ripple effects extended beyond the immediate royal family to influence how other monarchies approached similar challenges. European royal houses began consulting with British officials about adapting their own roles to contemporary diplomatic needs, while Commonwealth realms evaluated whether similar expansions might benefit their own constitutional relationships. Media coverage evolved to reflect her established credibility, with royal correspondents focusing on policy implications and diplomatic outcomes rather than personality-based stories. The transformation in journalistic approach mirrored broader public acceptance of her expanded role as legitimate and effective rather than controversial or experimental. Public opinion polling showed steady improvement in approval ratings, with particular strength among younger demographics who valued her substantive contributions to international affairs. The evolution in public sentiment reflected growing recognition that her role expansion represented effective modernization rather than inappropriate power accumulation. The international speaking invitations continued to increase, with organizations worldwide seeking her perspective on everything from Commonwealth relations to women's leadership in diplomatic contexts. Each engagement required careful evaluation to ensure consistency with her constitutional role while maximizing positive impact for British interests. One particularly significant invitation came from the United Nations, requesting her participation in a high-level panel on conflict resolution and peacekeeping. The opportunity to address global leaders on subjects directly related to her diplomatic work represented another milestone in the evolution of her role, while requiring preparation that drew on all her accumulated experience and expertise. The preparation for major international speeches had become a collaborative process involving constitutional experts, foreign policy specialists, and communications professionals who helped ensure her words carried appropriate weight while remaining within proper boundaries for royal expression. The sophistication required for these presentations far exceeded anything in traditional queen consort responsibilities. As the first year of her expanded role neared completion, Camilla reflected on the extraordinary transformation in both her capabilities and her understanding of royal service. The journey had tested every aspect of her character while providing opportunities for contribution that extended far beyond traditional ceremonial functions. The challenges remained substantial. Each diplomatic success raised expectations for future interventions, while the constant scrutiny required exceptional personal discipline and emotional resilience. The balance between public service and personal sustainability required ongoing attention and periodic adjustment. Yet the rewards were equally significant. The knowledge that her work contributed meaningfully to international peace and Commonwealth stability provided satisfaction that transcended traditional royal duties. The respect she had earned from political leaders, diplomatic professionals, and international observers validated the expansion of her role while opening doors for future contributions. The final assessment would come from history's perspective on whether the precedent she had established would prove beneficial for both the monarchy and British interests over the long term. The immediate evidence suggested that her expanded role had successfully modernized royal service while maintaining essential constitutional principles. Looking forward, Camilla understood that her experience would influence how future queen consorts approached their responsibilities, while the systems and procedures developed during her transition would provide frameworks for continued evolution of royal roles. The woman who had once seemed an unlikely figure for the throne had become a transformational force in how that throne served the nation and world. The story of her expanded role continued to unfold with each new challenge and opportunity, but the foundation had been established for a form of royal service that honored tradition while embracing the diplomatic and international responsibilities required by contemporary circumstances. The precedent she had set would resonate through future generations of the monarchy, marking her as a figure who had fundamentally changed what it meant to serve as queen consort in the modern era.